We started with car sharing, and then we moved on to accommodation. So we list 90% of the UK car sharing market. We've got Zipcar and BlaBlaCar and LiftShare, and all of the car sharing platforms you're likely to have heard about are on Compare and Share. And in terms of accommodation, we have now over 1.2 million properties. So for example, if you go to Airbnb, you're going to find just shy of 800,000, but in just 9 months, Compare and Share we now have an inventory of over 1.2 million from all those different platforms, and by the end of next year, we'll have 3 million homes on the platform. So really the idea of aggregation is very much about being able to offer Generation Share and the consumer very, very broad choice so that you can find exactly what you need. Exactly what you need. And that's really what the sharing economy is all about. It's about accessing these unused goods, releasing all that untapped value to find what it is that you need for your life.
Any more questions?
Anything you've ever wanted to know about the sharing economy? There we go, a brave man over there.
Hi, this is quite new to me, and I was wondering, it all sounds really nice, people sharing things they don't need and whatnot, and as long as it works out, it's like a great thing, right? But what if it doesn't work out? What is the legal side of it? So I borrow someone's car, I trash it, or I stay at someone's flat, something falls on my head. You as an intermediary, would you then chip in, or how does this work, basically?
Okay, so this is a really key question, and thank you for asking that. So I mentioned earlier that trust is at the heart of the sharing economy. It's the currency, and ultimately needs to be safe and secure for people to share. So I want to know that if I'm going to swap homes with someone, they're not going to trash my house, and I'm sure they'd like to know that I'm not going to trash theirs. And so this whole notion of verification, being able to verify that people are who they say they are, criminal records checks, insurances, ratings and reviews, recommendations. You need to be able to verify that people are who they say they are, and it's absolutely fundamental to this, absolutely fundamental. So most of these sharing websites have these mechanisms in place, and one of the things that we're developing at Compare and Share is something called Share Trade, which is a trust mark for the sharing economy. It's a badge. And what that will mean is that both individuals and companies will be able to run through a series of criteria to qualify for that. So, for example, a company would need to offer ratings and reviews, they would need to offer criminal records checks, they would need to offer verification, documentation verification, they would need to sign up to a code of conduct, because there are some principles underlying this of basic human decency, but that people need to actively opt into. And insurance needs to be part of this mix. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. Now, you just mentioned insurance. So if I'm a landlord, I would need to get landlord insurance. So in case something happens to the tenants and whatnot. So is that something that you would have to get as well? I mean, if I want to be part of the sharing community, do I get special insurance? Is this covered by insurance companies? Does it incur premiums? I mean,
So we've been involved recently with a piece of work working with some of the major global insurance companies who's put together a guide called Insurance and the Sharing Economy. Not the snappiest title in the world, but it will do. And essentially what we recognised was that there was a real need to have very specific tailored policies for sharing businesses and for individuals to engage in this space, because the existing policies weren't relevant. And so there has been a move, and it's been slow adoption, but the insurance companies are recognising that there's a need for this, because there's a huge number of people out there that are engaging in this kind of activity. And it's a big market. I mean, estimates on the value of the sharing economy range from $110 billion right the way up to $330 billion. So it's a very lucrative market. And it's also, what's really interesting from the kind of future business perspective is that, to look at it one way, businesses now have a completely different relationship with their consumers. Now that people can trade with other people, they're no longer reliant on large corporations. And so large corporations who want to future-proof their businesses are recognizing that what they need to do in some way is enable this peer-to-peer activity that's happening. And we're starting to see large corporates that are really getting on this bandwagon and are looking at different ways in which they can get involved. Now that might be like Avis, who acquired Zipcar. It could be, for example, Kingfisher with B&Q and Street Club, which is a tool sharing platform that they run. Marriott Hotels, they partnered with Liquid Space to essentially make use of unused corners of the hotel so entrepreneurs could hold business meetings. So lots of different ways in which we're seeing all kinds of partnerships spring up between traditional businesses and those very businesses that are really disrupting how we've carried out our business. But it is really about the long haul, and it's about future-proofing your business, because this is the direction of travel. People recognize that now they can trade with other people, now that you can be a supplier or a producer of goods and services, this makes complete sense to people. And companies are recognizing this, and they're seeing that actually these are more sustainable business models, they're good for people, they're good for the planet, good for business, essentially. Does that answer your question?
Any more questions?
I'm sure there must be some questions out there. Anything you'd like to know about the sharing economy, how it works? So just, I have some questions for you. So I'm interested to know who's in the audience. So maybe people can just sort of shout out, just a little bit about what you're doing and your backgrounds, because it'd be great to have a sense of how this could potentially be relevant for what you're doing. So are you marketeers? What areas do you work in? Over here. Yes.
I did have run a small sales and marketing agency. So my cynical marketing head is, I guess, what potential is there to market to these people? Are you offering, like Facebook has Facebook ads and bits and pieces like that? Is your sort of presentation about that, or is it just about this sort of sharing communities that are out there and how it's running? Is there sort of, possible opportunity for marketers to use the platform to engage with that massive audience?
Definitely. Huge opportunities for marketers. And I guess what's really critical to this is to understand that those traditional marketing techniques don't work for this generation. So it's really about, how, for example, those digital campaigns might be run, and they need to be focusing on great content, offering something that's useful to Generation Share, that's going to create conversation, that is done in a conversational way. So it is very much about this whole idea of community and friendship, and there's a certain amount of knowledge around it. We find that whenever we have a blog post that's giving people some really useful information, we ran one blog post which was about how, through car sharing you could save £3,000 a year. And people were really interested in that. They're really interested in what that meant for them and how they could save money. So, saving money is one aspect of it, and of course as a driver, and of course making money is another aspect of it. And we're seeing all kinds of sort of micro enterprises that are popping up around the sharing economy, and people recognizing that, actually I can make quite a bit of healthy cash renting out, my spare space or my driveway, or the items that I have, in my cupboards. So all kinds of opportunities. So yes, definitely. And also what you've got to bear in mind is that this is an audience, this is a target market who are educated, who are, some of the data shows that, this definitely has a middle class appeal. They tend to be employed. And so, an interesting group to look at. You're talking about a subset of the millennials. So you can apply a lot of those, those ideas in terms of how you market to millennials. A lot of those same principles apply.
Hiya. Are you more towards the comparison market or more towards the sharing market? Are you replacing the comparison, like Go Compare and things like that, and giving comparative results? Or are you replacing the lots of sharing platforms which are already there? So are you towards the comparison side?
It's a very good question. So what we did was we started, we're less than 2 years old. So we started we built the compare piece. So essentially we built a thriving marketplace with the over, 1.2 million properties on it so that, the comparison side of things, ultimately the supply side, we've really focused on that in our kind of early year. And the next phase of our development is really to focus on the share side of the brand. And I mentioned this one share login, the ability for people to be able to list their shares on the platform. And we will always work in partnership with those. It's an affiliate model. My business is an affiliate business. And we work in partnership with those platforms. That's how we work. And we have relationships. We don't scrape any data. I'm a global expert in the sharing economy, and we have lots of unique market intelligence, but we have relationships across the different verticals. And there is a recognition within the space that this is about growing it. It's about growing it, the pie gets bigger, it's better for everybody, because when consumers can find what they need and you've got that consistent consumer choice, this is good for everybody across all the different verticals. They also recognize that there are real opportunities in terms of cross-vertical selling, because people come into the marketplace because they want to share rides, but actually they also need some accommodation, and vice versa, and other things. So it's a really interesting, because you've got to bear in mind this is a lifestyle choice. This is about people saying, actually, this is how I want to lead my life, by accessing rather than owning. Does that answer the question? Any other questions? How are we doing for time? So I've got a little exercise that I thought we'd do.
15 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to do this. So what I'd like everyone to do is, if everyone can just stand up. And what I'd like you to do is, we're going to do a very quick bit of speed sharing. So when I clap, I'd like everybody to turn to someone that you don't, or everyone's terrified, you see, look at this, terrified of sharing. I just want you to turn to someone that you don't know and just tell them what you think about the sharing economy, just from what you've heard, just your opinion, anything interesting, anything that's a takeaway. And then when you see me waving my hands madly and clapping like this, we're going to stop. So, okay. Okay, so I'm interested to hear what people have to say about the sharing economy. So any thoughts, opinions, any takeaways, anything you've learned, anything you didn't like, anything you did like?
So I have a question.
Yes.
How does it make money for brands or companies?
So the businesses, like, for example, Airbnb, they take a percentage of every single transaction that goes through their site. So Airbnb is currently valued at $10 billion. Uber, many of you heard of Uber, is now valued at $17 billion. Huge amounts of capital flowing through the sharing economy, because this is not about a cashless economy. Just to be really clear, we are talking about something that is transaction-based. There is a part of the sharing economy where there's a free exchange. And that's also part of the sharing economy. I mentioned it's a broad church. So there are sites, for example, where you're exchanging your time banks and so on, very much part of the sharing economy. But in terms of the businesses in the sharing economy, this is about enabling you to access goods, shared goods. So rather than owning them, you're accessing them just for that piece of time that you need them. So you're sharing them effectively, or sharing the life cycle of the product.
Uber is just not the taxi booking platform?
So this is possibly one of the most controversial questions. So I'm glad you've asked it. We could be here all day, but I'll try not to be. So there is a debate as to whether Uber is in fact part of the sharing economy. Now, I recently was in Silicon Valley as part of a Google program that Compare and Share was selected for, called Black Box Connect. And because of the geography of Silicon Valley, I had the opportunity, or I had the need, I should say, to use Uber fairly regularly during the time period I was there. It would be impossible for me to use, public transport doesn't exist in half of these places. And what's interesting when you use the app is you start to understand that what it does is it removes the need for ownership. And you say, what is the point in owning a vehicle? Because it's so convenient, it's cost effective, so it's removing the need for ownership. So on that basis, I would consider that it's certainly in the shadows of the sharing economy in that respect. But it's not, I wouldn't call it a heartland sharing economy business. Yeah. Right. If you look at a company like, for example, I don't know if you've heard of BlaBlaCar, and BlaBlaCar, great app, it encompasses all the things that I'm talking about. It's very social. When you sign up, you get to say, what kind of a person are you? Are you a blah? Are you a blah blah? Or a blah blah blah? How much do you talk? No prizes for guessing which category I'd fall into. And essentially, that's a great opportunity for people to connect with other people, save lots of money, lowers carbon, so it's doing its bit for the planet. And that, I would call that is much more of a, sort of heartland sharing economy business. And there are also social enterprises and there are not-for-profits, there are charities in the sharing economy. One example would be Fair Share. And what they do is they deliver food that would otherwise go to landfill to people living in food poverty. And that's how, and they have an interesting business model. They charge the manufacturers to take the food off their hands. This is not food that's out of date. This is food that might be the 12th outer layer of packaging, might have a tear in it. So they charge the manufacturers to take that food off their hands, and then they charge the hostels a low cost, much lower than anywhere else, when they sell their food. And it's solving a huge social problem, which is why they're a social enterprise. So lots of interesting models. They're very disruptive business models. There's a business called TaskRabbit, which started out in the US, and essentially that is tearing up the labour market, because essentially it started out as a platform where you could say, I need someone to walk my dog at lunchtime when I'm really busy, and someone could bid for that task and say, okay, I'll do that for $5, and they're called rabbits. And you go through a process and you get all kinds of star ratings if you're a star rabbit. But essentially what that's doing is it's offering huge opportunities, especially for women, people who need to access part-time work, for example, those that need to fit work in around maybe childcare or other interests that they have or other jobs that they have. So it's really sort of tearing up industry, and these sharing economy businesses are incredibly disruptive, but they're making a big noise and they're really changing the face of business, and big corporations are absolutely taking note. And we do a fair amount of work with these large corporations, and they recognize there is a need to get on board with this, because this is how business is going to be done in the future. And these consumer trends are huge global trends. So that, the evidence, the numbers are out there, and it's a very, very interesting space to be in. But it's interesting to see how it's disrupting traditional industry. Any other questions? Last comments, last thoughts? Can I just ask everybody, if you are on Twitter, if you could maybe stand up, take a photo, something that's relevant, and use the hashtag sharing economy, and just tweet something that you've learned about the sharing economy in this session, or something that was useful, or something you agreed with or disagreed with. That would be great. I'm Benita. Thanks very much for sharing, and if you need to contact me, you have my contact information. Thanks so much.